I'm Justin Maurice, and I'd like to fill the position of an assassin.
What are your qualifications for this job?
Well, being a woman, no one would really accuse me or suspect me. And I've also traveled to Europe and Switzerland and here and there, and I know Geneva pretty well.
Okay. What are your past experiences in this field?
I'm currently on trial for murdering a young boy, but no one believes that I'm the culprit, so I believe I put on a pretty good facade.
So what have been your weaknesses in the past?
I'm still working on covering up my tracks, but if I get this job, that'll be the first thing I work on.
In what way haven't you covered your tracks?
Well, somehow I was found with a picture that belonged to the boy that was murdered, and the detectives found it.
What is your reasoning to get this position?
Well, as I said before, I'm on trial, and if I'm found guilty, I'll be executed shortly after, so why not live the rest of my days seeking adventure? Do you get where I'm coming from?
No. So now that we've finished all of my questions for you, do you have any questions for me?
How soon do you think you could get back to me if I got this job or not?
I would say, well, we have one more applicant left, so we'll have to see after that.
Okay, thank you.
State your name and your reason of being here. What are your qualifications for this job? What are your past experiences in this field? So now that we finished all the questions that I have for you, do you have any questions for me?
I choose who kill?
No, that's not how it works. I choose who you kill.
Describe Justine and the way she's acting. One of the quotes that we used was, "You are all mistaken. I know the murderer. Justine, poor good Justine, is innocent," on page 71, and several witnesses were called, those who had known her for many years, and they spoke well of her, on page 75. So basically these statements support her claims of putting on a good facade, and it just shows that the people that believed her took a stand for her and believed she was innocent, even though she claims not to be. And another quote that we used was when the evidence was piled up against her and she had claimed that she couldn't cover up her tracks. So the quote that we used for that was, "During this interval, one of the servants, happening to examine the apparel she had worn on the night of the murder, had discovered in her pocket the picture of my mother, which had been judged to be the temptation of the murderer," on page 71. So this just shows that the evidence was piled up against her and they found her to be guilty. And so Justine had failed to cover up her tracks and was believed to have killed William. So overall, she had a good interview because she didn't hesitate to respond. She always stayed on topic, kept good eye contact, didn't repeat her answers. She dressed appropriately. And she's thorough when she explained her answers. She didn't ramble, and she also stayed calm and still. She didn't move around too much. And we used a polysyndeton in hers, and it was, "I have traveled to Europe and Switzerland and here and there, and I know Geneva pretty well." So that just exaggerated her of where she traveled, and it just lengthened the explanation, and it drew more attention to the details. And it also supported her qualifications for the job.
Now we're going to go over the monster's behaviors throughout the interview. To support our evidence of his not knowing how to make complete sentences, we used, "At the time, I knew nothing of the science of words or letters," on page 98. He uses mumbled words and doesn't even complete sentences throughout the interview, and it shows throughout the book also. And when he starts to learn how to read, that he is truly influenced purely on his surroundings. And for his rash impulses throughout the interview, we used the quote of, "He was urged by this impulse. I seized on the boy as he passed and drew him towards me. You shall be my first victim. I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet," on page 126 and 127. So he was truly dependent on the rash actions caused by anger, which always ended up in murder for him, which is evident in our interview too. So some bad characteristics that he did throughout his interview was he did not have good answers, he had a lack of substance and repeated his phrasing a lot, he had a language barrier which was difficult for the interviewer to understand, he had fits of rage, didn't quite understand the point of the interview, and then he murdered his interviewer, which is never a very good action. We used an ascendaton in his interview, which was, "I search, I find, I kill." This shows his animalistic instinct and his ignorance to the human heart and how it was such a struggle for him to learn how to be a human again. So that is our analysis on our interview.